There are moments in the human experience when the heavens feel closed. You pray and nothing stirs. You cry and nothing answers. Your wait in time drags like a shadow through the valley of unanswered questions. For the soul that aches for God, silence can be more terrifying than suffering itself. Cslewis once wrote, "When you are happy, so happy that you have no sense of needing him, you will be so it feels welcomed with open arms. But go to him when your need is desperate, when all other help is vain, and what do you find? A door slammed in your face. This is not blasphemy. This is honesty. This is the raw, bleeding heart of faith in the wilderness. In the desert of divine silence, something deeper is revealed, not the absence of God, but the collapse of illusion. The illusion that God is our servant, that prayer is a transaction, that faith is rewarded on demand. We forget that God is not an algorithm nor a cosmic vending machine dispensing blessings in exchange for obedience. He is the I am, eternally sovereign, disturbingly free, intimately holy, and his silence is not indifference. It is often invitation. In the silence, the soul is unmasked. The ego panics, the flesh groans, the spirit waits. And it is precisely in that sacred waiting that something mysterious happens. Sower, love for God is refined from need into desire, from demand into devotion. We begin to long for him not because he answers, but because he answers, but because he is. The scriptures are filled with divine silences. Abraham waited decades. Joseph sat in prison for crimes he didn't commit. Job's entire world collapsed while heaven remained quiet. Even Christ himself, in Gethsemane, cried out to the Father and received no rescue from the cup he was to drink. The silence of God is not a sign of his absence, but a test of our alignment. It reveals whether we love him for his gifts or for his presence, whether we follow him because he makes our lives easier or because he is life. Be still and know that I am God. The psalmist says not, be busy, not be successful, but be still. Because it is in stillness, not in striving, that we remember who God is and who we are not. Waiting is not punishment. It is process, a divine furnace where idols are burned, illusions are shattered, and faith is forged into something unshattered. God is not in a hurry because he is eternal, and he is not withholding himself to torment us, but to shape us, to silence us so we can finally hear, to empty us so we can truly fill. So, we wait not as beggars, but as beloved, not with clenched fists, but with open hands. And if we dare to believe, even when the heavens seem sealed, we may find that the silence was not God turning away but drawing us deeper into himself. Time is the crucible of faith. In it, we either decay or are refined. There is no neutral waiting. Every moment spent in silence becomes a shaping force. Either the silence corrodes our soul with bitterness, or it chisels us into deeper communion. Cslewis once said, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." That is the paradox. To trust a God who is good, even when his goodness wounds. Abraham and Sarah waited a lifetime for a promise that came wrapped in impossibility. And in the long stretch of silence between promise and fulfillment, they stumbled, doubted, even laughed, but still they remained. They waited, and God, in his unhurried majesty, proved faithful not to their schedule, but to his covenant. You see, the silence of God often coincides with the slow dismantling of our own agendas. We want deliverance now, resolution now, peace now. But God's ways are higher. His thoughts stretch beyond the tyranny of our time. In Isaiah 46:10, he declares, "I make known the end from the beginning. My purpose will stand, and I will do all that I please." That's the voice of sovereignty, not sentimentality. He is not molding our lives for comfort, but for eternity. And eternity cannot be rushed. The story of Joseph is drenched in divine delay, sold by his brothers, imprisoned unjustly, forgotten by those he helped. For years, heaven was silent. But what felt like abandonment was preparation. When the silence finally broke, Joseph wasn't just delivered, he was positioned, elevated. And his words to his betrayers echo through history. "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." This is the mystery. The silence that feels like rejection may be the very womb of resurrection. What if the waiting is not a pause in the story but the most important chapter? What if it is in the waiting that we are prepared for what we've asked for? Or perhaps, even more mysteriously, for something we never dared to ask. Waiting is holy ground. It is where faith matures from childish demand into steadfast trust. It is where we stop dictating to God and start listening. And in that listening, we begin to perceive the whispers that cannot be heard in noise, the subtle redirection, the quiet conviction, the gentle assurance that he is still working. Proverbs 3:5-6 tells us to trust in the Lord with all our heart and not lean on our own understanding. Why? Because our understanding is too shallow to hold the weight of God's plans. We see moments, he sees eternity. We crave relief, he creates redemption. In the delay, we may discover that what we thought we needed was not the answer but the nerve. And sometimes, the answer is the A heart molded in the furnace of waiting becomes something the world cannot crush. The one who has learned to trust in the silence is the one who can praise without the proof, love without the logic, and walk without the map. So, we wait, but not idly. We wait worshiping, because in God's silence, He is not passive, He is precise. And if we surrender to the shaping, the silence will not harden us, it will sanctify us. The closed heavens are not always a sign of divine neglect but of divine intimacy disguised as distance. For it is in the silence of God that we begin to hear the truth within ourselves. Silence has a way of unmasking the soul. It reveals our hidden fears, exposes our idols, confronts our need for control, and in that sacred confrontation, something essential is born. Cslewis once reflected that God whispers in our pleasures, but shouts in our pain. But what if His silence is not a shout, nor a whisper but a stillness so holy? It demands reverence. In those seasons, we often cry out like David in Psalm 13, "It's not blasphemy, it's intimacy." For only those who have tasted divine closeness dare to grieve divine distance. The ache of absence reveals the memory of no, and that longing, that holy discontent is itself a form of worship. Consider the Garden of Gethsemane. Christ, trembling, sweating, blood, crying to the Father, "If it be your will, take this cup from me." And yet heaven was silent. But was the Father absent? No, He was nearer than ever. For in the silence, the greatest act of love unfolded. There is a sacred way to unspoken answers. Sometimes, silence is a language of trust, the Father allowing the Son to walk through darkness, not because He had abandoned him, but because love required the path of pain. Likewise, when we walk through our own gardens of sorrow, our own Gethsemanes, we may feel alone. But faith is not the absence of fear. It is the presence of God in the midst of fear. The silence may feel cruel, but it is not empty. Hebrews 4:15 assures us that we have a high priest who understands our weaknesses. The silence is not divine apathy, it is divine empathy expressed through mystery. And it is doing more in us than we can see. In the stillness, we begin to notice what noise drowns out: the quiet, sustaining hand of God, the undeserved breath, the grace in every unnoticed detail. While we beg for thunder, He provides dew. The delay forces us to shift from expectation to appreciation, from demanding outcomes to cherishing presence, from a transactional God to a relational one. And isn't that what we were made for? Relationship, not resolution. To walk with God, not merely receive from Him. In the book of Romans chapter 8, we are told that the Spirit intercedes for us with groanings too deep for words. Even when we don't know what to pray, heaven is praying through us. There is no silence so profound that grace cannot inhabit it. There is no delay so long that it escapes God's timing. There is no heart so weary that His Spirit cannot revive it. In that unseen place, waiting becomes worship. And worship, in silence, becomes the most honest kind. No performance, no spectacle, just a soul, bare and trembling, reaching toward a God who seems silent but is still holding everything together. In our suffering, we are not abandoned, we are being drawn into the mystery of a God who allows delay, yet never wastes it. A God who speaks through silence, but never stops loving. A God who seems distant, but who weeps with us. And when the time comes, and it will, when the silence breaks and the dawn returns, we will not be the same. We will be deeper, wiser, softer. We will carry within us the weight of glory forged in the quiet fires. The fires that did not consume us, but consecrated us. Time, in the kingdom of God, is not measured by seconds but by surrender. What feels like a delay on earth is often divine precision in heaven. God does not wear a watch. He writes eternity into the cracks of waiting hearts. And in that divine rhythm, the soul is reshaped not around what it desires, but around what it needs to become. We wait for things to happen. God waits for us to transform. In the silence, the impatient soul asks, when will the promise arrive? But the maturing soul begins to ask, who am I becoming while I wait? This shift is sacred. It is the moment when delay ceases to be a punishment and becomes a pilgrimage. Waiting is no longer about the absence of movement, it is about the presence of formation. Abraham was not just waiting for Isaac. He was becoming the father of nations. Moses did not simply endure 40 years in the wilderness. He was being refined into a liberator. David wasn't only hiding in caves. He was being prepared to wear a crown with humility. In the furnace of delay, God melts away what cannot enter the promised land. Entitlement dies. Control shatters. False identities are stripped. And what remains is something heaven can use. A surrendered heart, willing to follow without knowing, to trust without seeing, to worship without answers. This is the path of spiritual maturity. It is not glamorous. It is not loud. It is hidden like roots beneath the soil, yet it sustains everything above. Isaiah 42:31 declares, but those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. It does not say those who receive shall renew, it says those who wait. Strength comes not from arrival, but from abiding. Waiting is not passive, it is fiercely active. It is the labor of hope, the warfare of trust, the discipline of stillness. Cslewis observed that we are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be. And that is the paradox we carry. That divine goodness often wears the disguise of earthly grief. That the best answers are often not what we would choose, but what we most need. So, we learn to breathe in silence, to pray without clarity, to trust when it feels foolish. And in that surrender, something in us softens. We begin to see delay, not as a barrier but as a mirror. A mirror showing us who we are, and who we are not yet. The Israelites wandered for 40 years, not because the journey was long, but because the transformation was incomplete. The wilderness is not God's punishment, it is His preparation. It is the proving ground where freedom is internalized, where identity is clarified, where covenant becomes more than words, it becomes blood and breath. And through that waiting, we stop asking for a change in circumstance and start asking for a change in soul. God is not only preparing things for you, He is preparing you for things. The door you wait for is not just locked, it is being carved, shaped by your tears, your questions, your perseverance. When it opens, you won't just walk through it, because who you become in the silence is who you must be for the blessing not to break you. There is no wasted waiting in the hands of a God who sees the end from the beginning. Ecclesiastes says He makes all things beautiful in its time, not ours is, and beauty formed in divine timing will never rot with regret. You will not look back and wish you had arrived sooner. You will look back and say, now I understand why it took so long. There is a kind of glory that does not blaze like lightning or roar like thunder. It arrives like dew on the grass, like the soft breath of dawn after a night of storms. This is the glory found in the slow unfolding, in the sacred art of waiting. The world exalts speed faster, bigger, louder, but heaven does not rush. It whispers in deserts, it chisels in caves, it nurtures in shadows. The most eternal things are formed in hidden places. A child is shaped in the womb. A seed dies before it breaks open. And a solus soli is quietly sculpted beneath the weight of unanswered prayers. This is not punishment. This is not absence. This is holy attention. God does not abandon those who wait. He dwells with them. Psalm 46:10 urges, be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not an act, it is trust wrapped in silence. When we are stripped of the illusion that we can control the outcome, what remains is raw faith, a faith that has been tested by silence and still chooses to believe. This is the faith that moves mountains, the faith that endures crosses, the faith that echoes through eternity. Cslewis once said, to walk out of God's will is to walk into nowhere, and often, God's will is not a clear road but a wilderness with only enough light for the next step. We crave a map. He offers us a hand. We want to know the destination. He teaches us to delight in the journey. In our waiting, we become compassionate through suffering. We become wise through wrestling. We become holy through surrender. We become who we were, always meant to be, not despite the delay, but because of it. The story of Lazarus echoes through all who wait. Lord, if you had been here. But Jesus was not late, He was perfect. He waited not out of negligence, but because resurrection was always better than healing. God is not merely fixing our situation. He is forming our spirit. He delays to deepen. He waits to awaken. He hides to heal. In the silence, heaven is not. Still it is building. And when the fullness of time comes, what emerges will not be a fragile answer but a fortified soul. Galatians 6:9 reminds us, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. There is a harvest coming, not always what we expected, but always what we most deeply needed. And when that moment arrives, we will not just receive, we will recognize the fingerprints of God all over the silence, the grace hidden in the delay, the transformation encoded into every tear. You were never just waiting for a breakthrough. You were being broken open for something deeper, something sacred, something eternal. The silence was not empty, it was full of God. And now, having waited, having surrendered, having trusted, your soul can finally carry the weight of the promise. You do not arrive hurried or bitter. You arrive whole, quiet, transformed, and grateful. The waiting has not only changed your life, it has changed you.